Okay, so you'd have seen this in my most recent video. I've been doing a lot of testing. I've been testing the warhead motors, I've been testing stuff for gate, I have been testing stuff for Perrin. I've been doing lots of testing because I'm trying to figure out, not problems, but the best solutions to what other people can do to their guns. Because there are things that, as much as you want an explanation for it, you don't get an explanation. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever until someone explains it to you. There is stuff that I don't know. There is stuff that I don't know. But equally, there are things that I know that make complete sense to me that other people, it just boggles their mind. And when I think back a few years, that same shit boggled their mind. Now this video, sections of it and probably a cleaned up version, is going to go to the Warhead channel as well. But I want to cover a few bits and pieces. Obviously, you saw this the other day. This is running 2.5s currently. I'm going to give it a quick chrono test. Batteries. There are numerous batteries that you can get, different voltage, different type, and I'm trying to figure out which is the best battery. Now, recently, a year or so ago, I guess, I started using Lions, and I was really happy with them. But things were happening that I didn't understand. I was getting given batteries by people going, yeah, here is a battery. It just keeps, the cables just keep coming off of it. The cables just desolder. Or the links between the batteries, you know, I don't know the term for it, there's just a flap of metal that is soldered between the cells. They are coming detached. And companies that are offering warranty on the batteries are going, nope, that's outside of warranty. Shit like this. Just coming detached. You can see. Now, these are a lot more stable than a LiPo. And I was actually happier with them. And I was really happy because the 7.4 Lions were giving me a better response and a happier amp draw and current. But I found the 11.1 Lions were a little bit too much. But I got a whole load of these in and I was happy with them. And then I started noticing things. Now, what I've noticed recently is that whatever's written on the side of the battery, the C rating and all that stuff, generally speaking, it's absolute made up nonsense. It really is. It's some fucking writing put on the outside. And I think it's just based on best case scenario. I can't, you know, I've got 20C batteries that are giving out more than 30C batteries of the same brand and the same type. And it's kind of pissing me off. Now, the biggest issue I was finding is that if your build is not modified in a certain way, people want to have a snappy trigger response. They want snappy trigger response and they want a decent full auto. Now, people often say the semi-auto is the most important thing, but I do like to use the full auto and I would like it to be slightly quicker than most. On a 7.4, not always possible. So I was doing builds with warhead motors where I was using 45k motors or 52k motors and I was matching them with 7.4 Lions and LiPos. And it gave me a really nice semi-auto and a very, very good full auto. But people wanted to use their 11.1s. They've already got the 11.1s. And as much as you can tell somebody, don't skimp out on your build, don't bother with batteries, you know, get the correct battery for the build. The risk that I had, and has occurred once, using, I think it was a 45k motor and the 7.4, the chap was happy, and the first thing he did when his 7.4 died was use his 11.1, oh, it'll be fine. Well, he told me what he wanted, I told him which battery to use. Is he going to not play for the last hour of the day, or is he going to risk it on 11.1? Yeah, he risked it on 11.1, and he blew a bearing out, simply put. And he said, no, this is my fault, you told me not to do it, so I just took it apart, put a new bearing in, and went, naughty, naughty, that's the end of it. But I started having conversations with other techs and other people in the know, because I know loads of shit about loads of this. I really do. I know loads and loads of shit. But there's stuff that I don't know, and that I just can't make the information go in my mind in a way that, you know how I explain to you guys? People need to do the same thing to me when it comes to certain things. So I spoke to Josh at Airsmiths, and obviously he doesn't do electric gun builds, he does HPA. But he knows all about batteries. He used to own a vape shop. and he's explaining about Lions, and everything I was concerned with, or beginning to get concerned with the Lions, was coming true. And that is that these are designed to give out a constant small amount of energy. They're not designed to give out a mad amount of energy in very brief but repeated bursts. It was no good for that. And I think that is where a lot of these problems are coming from, because more and more people are going, yep, I'm having lots of issues with Lions, and the wires just completely come detached. From everyone I've spoke to that's having the same issue, it would seem that, yeah, they're just not really designed for this purpose. So I've had to move away from Lions. So then you've got the choice of Nimmies. And Nimmies are readily available, they're easy and safe to use, they don't give out as much energy, they're big, they're bulky, and they're actually quite expensive. And they are not ideal for a lot of builds. You couldn't just throw a Nimmy inside your ARP9 if it's got a little tiny stock. You know, to get the performance you want, you're not going to get it. But there are times when the 7.4 battery just isn't enough. So let me give you an explanation on this. This is a Mahusiv 7.4. This is a little 7.4. Here is what the gun is going to sound like on both. Now, I've tested this recently with a Perrin hybrid. Exactly the same. I've gone back to using the Asta because I'm testing everything. .7.4, beep beep. Let's move this shit. So 7.4, 0.88 on a 2.5, 0.88 on a 2.5. Okay? Boom. We'll give it one more. .89. Now you heard the response there. I'm now going to use the Mahusiv 7.4. Beep beep. Mahusiv 7.4. Sounds different, doesn't it? Doesn't sound bad. It just sounds different. Now we're going to go with the 7.4 Lion. Notice how that just sounds nicer. It's giving out more energy than... But now listen. Hear it? It always does that on the Lion. Let's get it closer. Yeah? It doesn't do that on the 7.4 LiPos or the 11.1 LiPos. It doesn't do that. Obviously this one's fucked. 20C 11.1 1100 milliamp. So this will beep at me 3 times. This is why I'm going with this, so you can hear the cells beeping. Ready? That is only marginally faster than the big 7.4. And it's actually slower in trigger response than the 7.4 Lion, but the Lion made it act up. 25C, 1300 milliamps. So 5C is more, 200 milliamps more, with 11.1. Right? Much, much faster response. Much faster response. 0.88 joule. So what I'm noticing when I'm using the 11.1s is that this starts to get hot. The motor is beginning to get warm. And that is on the 11.1 25C. Now I want to have the trigger response on semi that I was getting with the 11.1, but I don't want the heat. I feel like the energy is coming from the battery, it's going straight into the motor, and it's getting hot, and certain ETUs react differently. I found that with a Perrin hybrid, I had more heat from the 11.1 than what I did with this Aster, but with a Titan, I was getting more heat than both on the 11.1. On the 7.4s, always fine, but the Lion 7.4 made this Aster make funny sounds. Fuck knows why. And I thought, how can I get that semi-auto response? Because I then started taking the motor out of the gun and holding it in my hand. Now, I did this with the Perrin. When you pull the trigger with the motor out of the gun, it will spin and then beep at you because it hasn't recognised the sector gear, and the unit shuts down for a moment. It goes, nah, you can't pull the trigger again because there's a problem. The motor's turning, but the gears are not being noted that it's turning. So there could be a sensor failure, your gears could be broken, something's wrong. And then give it a moment and it comes back to life. After about 15 shots, the motor was getting really hot. So it's not that it's under load. That wasn't a load problem. It wasn't a shimming problem. The motor was getting hot. Now, it was hotter those days than it is now. And the ambient temperature was having an effect. And I'm thinking, right, hang on. So I then put the same setup, so I changed the spring, but I made it into a big spring, M150 spring. And I got less heat while the gun was firing, but only the motor. The Aster didn't pick up any extra heat, and my ammeter didn't pick up any extra amp draw. It just didn't. But the battery motor was going, fuck off mate, I'm getting hot. And after a good few weeks of me puzzling, like, why is this? Between talking to other techs and then talking to a battery manufacturer and importer and company, people who deal with nothing but batteries, they have said, yep, Lions are not the way to go for your purpose. And 11.1, if the battery is supplying energy to the motor and the motor is going, this is all the energy that I need to turn and function this gun, the cycle is finished. The energy's going in, everything's happening, but it's supplying more energy than it needs, and it's getting hot. Now, I've whinged before because people are very much, no, the gun will only use the energy that it needs. I knew that that was incorrect. It was just incorrect. It wasn't right at all. Because why does it not get hot on a 7.4? And people say voltage doesn't matter, you know, use 11.1, it doesn't matter. Well, it does, because the gun was drawing more amps on the 7.4, but wasn't getting hot, but that's only according to the Titan. There's lots going on here, and it's not as easy as just saying the battery will just give as much energy as it needs to the motor, and the motor will only take what it needs. That's not true. The cup is fucking running over. So I'm very much, what can I do about this? What can I do about this? 7.4 is not enough. 11.1 is too much. What happens if I use a 9.9 LiPo? It's a 20C, so it's not the biggest. It's less volts. The milliamp is less. The battery is slightly bigger. So, less milliamps, less voltage, the same Cs, battery's bigger. One downside. Watch this. It knows that it's 3 cells. That's good. We'll do it again. It knows that it's 3 cells. Now, the trigger response should technically be slower than on the 11.1, right? Now, when you do a build, if your everything is moving too fast, a power drop happens. You can also get a power drop when you activate brushless mode on an Aster or a Titan, because everything is starting to do things. You'd get a power gain because it's all about the build. As much as you can put a warhead motor into something, or you can put a high torque motor or a high speed motor, if the things are not tuned together, you won't get the best out of it. You will get a benefit, you won't get the best result. And that is what I'm now going with. So let's give this some full auto, shall we? And we're going to start with the small 7.4. This is the small 7.4, and listen to it. All right, let's move up to the big 7.4. 7.4 Lion. The rounds per second there were 12.5 a second. Full auto, 12.7. This is the smaller 11.1. Goes up to 18.1 a second. The bigger 11.1 LiPo. Power drops to 0.71 because this isn't quite as tuned. I've done nothing to the inside of the gearbox, it's just still the standard double bell gearbox, aside from the nozzle for the G3, the trigger, the plate, and the aster. So the power has dropped because I need to modify the tappet plate spring, the tappet plate, that stuff. But 21 a second. 9.9 LiPo. Recognises. $15.5, and the power has jumped to 0.96. We'll do that again. And we're going to do semi. And then we're going to do full auto. So you can see the rate of fire is higher than the 7.4, lower than the 11.1, but the power does go up on the LiPo. It seems to be the optimal amount of energy going to the motor. So for a high-speed build, and using a high-speed motor, I'm very happy with 9.9 LiPo because the semi-auto is crisp. And that is it, my mag is empty. Now, I have chatted with the guys at Warhead, and they have said that the 9.9 LiPo, yes, it will be a lower rate of fire than 11.1, but the semi-auto will still be faster than the 7.4, and it's going to be comparable to the 11.1. I'm going to be moving over, where needed, away from 11.1 if it's not a DMR build, where 11.1 is going to be the best case solution. I'm going to be using a lot of 7.4s and then 9.9 LiPos. A decent charger, you can charge all of those different kind of lithium batteries, just set it up. And again, thank you to Josh for explaining to me how the charger works, because I'm a thick cunt like that. Round 2. This has currently got the 9.9 LiPo in it. This has now also got the aftermarket handguard. I've not changed out the charging handle yet. I need to get hold of a black one. The grip I've just painted over in black. It doesn't look too bad, but I will get a replacement grip from it at some point. And then it's got the real steel stock on it. Now, the 9.9 LiPo is bigger than the equivalent size, or slightly bigger, of 11.1, but it is obviously bigger than the 7.4. But I can fit it inside here. It literally is just fitting in this tube section up there. So it still fits in most things. There will be guns that it's going to be a bit of a shit to stick inside. And that is where you need to think about your build. What are you going to put inside your build? How are you going to run it? Which battery are you going to use? And I guess this video is more of a, don't just go, I'm going to put high speed everything into everything and run it on 11.1, because you simply don't need to. Now again, 9.9 LiPo, it's a 35k base Warhead. I've not done a test fire yet, I've just pulled the trigger, made sure the motor height is correct. I have not changed over the motor pinion. I haven't shimmed this to the gearbox in any way. I've just literally thrown it in here. I could actually tighten that down a little bit further, maybe get an extra 2mm of push on the base plates, but then it made a little bit of noise. And again, the idea of this is so that I can do testing. It's not to have a finalised build. It's very quiet, it's very smooth, 0.86 joule. I expect this to jump up very slightly. You can hear how unbelievably quiet that is. Let's put my little box that I'm shooting at over here. 9.9 LiPo. It's lovely. It sounds lovely. It really does. Now, 18:1 standard gears, no short stroking. It's just perfect. You don't need to go 11.1. Again, brushless motors don't get a lot of heat. But I did find that with certain 11.1s and certain builds, I was getting heat. So I'm happy, actually. I'm actually quite happy. There's been lots and lots of noise outside now because there is some sort of chavvy fuckboy stupid festival for fucking chavvy car cunts. Might cut that out. So if you hear lots of noise like that, that's what it is. Now, I did the entirety of everything you just saw in the video, and I wasn't happy with it after editing, and I went back and I did a whole nother video, and I still wasn't happy, because what I don't want to do is give people the wrong information. It's very easy to give the wrong information accidentally, and rather than cut it out of what I put, because nothing I said was wrong, but I want to make sure that my point comes across absolutely clearly. And obviously you guys know that I know what I'm talking about with AEGs, I know what I'm talking about with gas guns, I know a lot about bolt action rifles, but gas guns and electric guns is what I know the most of. HPA I know fuck all, and I don't intend to. So I won't ever talk about the how to tech something HPA, in the same way I won't tell you how to cook something, because I haven't got a fucking clue, because I'm shit. So when I use certain terminology, people will pick up on the smallest little detail, and they will dwell on that one little thing that was said. And if you listen to the whole thing that I'm saying, you can hear it's just, it's a miscommunication of words. There's nothing more. And this occasion, there was one point where I said that the battery was giving energy, or supplying too much energy. Now, I want to be absolutely clear on something. I've dug out a completely different gun for this reason. So, again, I touched on it before. This is a D-Boys BY SY Kalash. This is a Chinese knockoff of the VFC, and I love this gun. This has got an LCT motor in it, it's got a Perrin hybrid, done loads of stuff to it. The owner used it a lot and then wanted to trade it in for something else, and that's what we did. So I'm going to go through everything again very briefly, but I'm going to just re-elaborate. Rather than just remove that shit I said before and pretend that it didn't happen, I'd rather go and say, no, sometimes I make mistakes, and I'm going to correct myself before you fuckers try to correct me. So the same video, it's not like I'm going back and changing my story like a fucking bad witness. I'm making note already, that wasn't accurate, but human nature. So, nothing I said was wrong. Nothing I said was wrong. So let's do this. 7.4, this is an LCT standard motor, all right? This gun is locked to semi. Okay, that is a big 7.4. Now let's go with the small 7.4. Okay, 25C11.1, you can hear that beep is a lot more. Yeah, and you could also hear that there was that clunk at the end, clunk when it finished firing, clunk. Yeah, slightly smaller 11.1. Not so much of a big clunk at the end, a little bit slower in its cycle time. Yeah, 7.4 Lion. Again, like I said, I'm turning my back on these. So, better than this one, not quite as good as this one. Now let's go with the 9.9 LiPo. That is giving the same trigger response as the 11.1. And it's got that same at the end, because this is supplying the energy in the same way that this is supplying the energy. Now, what I'm saying is that these things can be fussy. Now, if you're an expert on electricity, you know, electricity is electricity. There are different ways it can be supplied from batteries or mains terminals or whatever. And you can have different variations and different limits on how that energy is supplied. So whether it's a LiPo, whether it's a Lion, whether it's a LiPo, whether it's 7.4, whether it's small, whether it's big, those are all a variable. The common misconception that if the AEG is only going to take the energy it needs, why is it firing faster on 11.1 to 7.4? Why is it getting hot on 11.1 and not 7.4? Why is it that sometimes it's getting hot on 7.4, but it's not getting hot on 11.1? If a Lion is a 16C, which they write it on there, 20C, 40C, 68, you know, but when you look at the people who go, no, 16C, this is what they do, and you go, what? There is so much misinformation. There is so much misconception. You cannot change the electricity, but you can change how it's supplied. And the motor only drawing the energy it needs is an absolute misconception. Because if it only drew the energy it needs, it wouldn't get hot. If it's not taking enough energy, it might be getting hot. If your C rating is low, if you've got a 15C LiPo, a 15C 11.1 LiPo in a gun that's got a warhead motor in it, that's really good. Like, that's nice. If you've got 15C going through a high torque motor, you might get more heat than if you're using a 30C. But why are we not using 22.2 volts, 100C, 10,000 milliamp batteries? Ignore the fact it won't fit in your gun. Why are we not using that battery if it's going to give the best results to the gun? Why? Because the AEG is a massive variable. The motor only taking the energy it needs is absolutely not true. It's not true. Because if that were the case, if I take the motor from the gun and I hold it between two fingers and I pulse the trigger, or if I keep the trigger held down, the motor should not get hot. It will just be flawless all the way through. When the motor starts up and stops, that's going to create a difference in the drain. There are things that's going to make this get warm. You cannot possibly say that a 7.4 is going to give you less heat than 11.1, because that is not always true. But for the majority, it is. But it's not a 100% fact. The 11.1 30C is not going to be more efficient than a 20C because of this massive black and grey variable that's sat here on this bench right now. If you supply, let's say, a 60C, 50C or 60C, 11.1, 5,000 milliamp battery, which people use frequently in the States, if you are using that, and you're using it with a gun that's doing 400 feet per second, probably be alright. In the UK, no. Our springs are softer. It requires less energy to turn the motor. It requires less energy. We don't need that much energy. The motor is going to say, yep, I'm powered on, give me what you've got. And it's going to draw the energy. And the energy is going to flow through. The motor is going to be turning at the fastest the motor can turn at that point in time. But let's say the motor's dirty, it needs new brushes. Let's say it's outside of the gun. Let's say it's inside of the gun and the gun is over-shimmed, the gun is under-shimmed. 13:1 gears. DSG. I found the lowest amp draw I've ever got on a build is actually with a triple sector gear. Because that was just the lowest amp draw. And again, when I said that, people went fucking mental. No, 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 no. You know, using a bigger spring to compensate for the lower FPS, it's still the same springiness, it's still the same tension, it'll be the same. And it's like, yeah, on paper. The reality is that although hot rubbers wore out quicker on a triple sector gear than what they did in a dual sector gear, which ran out quicker than on a single sector gear, which ran out quicker than a DMR, which ran out quicker than a bolt action rifle, etc, etc. Don't know how further etc you can go with that. With all that said, the fact remains that the Titan that I used in the build, the diagnostics and everything were telling me you are getting less amp draw on a triple sector gear. You just are, mate. And that's what the little computer recognised. You can't argue that figure. Unless there's something wrong with the ETU, but Smet, you know, again, you can only go with what you've got. Telling people that the motor and the AEG will only take the energy it needs is absolutely not true. It's just not true. Because if the motor is going, I've got all this available current that I'm drawing and I'm pulling in, it's able to use that amount of energy. But if something up here is saying, I can't go any faster, you as a motor do not have the power, no matter what voltage you put through this, no matter what the amps are, no matter what the C rating of your battery, the milliamp hours of the battery, no matter what you do, Mr. Motor is completely unable to deal with everything it's drawing. It can't do it. Mr. Motor is saying, yep, I can do this. And the rest of the gun is saying, you don't have what it takes to make me function in this manner. You should have probably used some different gears. You know, you get a higher amp draw. This is, again, this is just my findings. Higher amp draw on things like 32:1 gears and 24:1 gears. I was getting a higher amp draw because the cycle time was slower. But it didn't get as hot because the energy was being distributed a lot more evenly. Dependent on the build, a 13:1 gear set may take more or less energy from the battery. There are so many variables involved in this that you can't just say, and this is the final point, the motor will only draw the energy it needs, and for that reason use the biggest battery possible, because it's just not true. And with the last 2 or 3 weeks of me banging my head on my desk going, I don't understand, now that I've moved over to 9.9 LiPos, and now the weather has gone a little bit more mild, those two things together, cool as a cucumber. Very, very nice amp draw. Everything is fine. When I use the 11.1, this gets a lot hotter than when I use this. But there is the jump between using the 7.4s. That is a big jump. So this is my final point. On the bench, these 3 batteries, this is the smallest I've got. This is the biggest I've got on the bench. This is the intermediate. The jump between this 1200 milliamp 20C 7.4 up to the 1300 milliamp 11.125C, that's a big jump. That isn't supplying quite enough energy to make the build efficient. That is supplying too much energy, which makes the build inefficient. Draws too much energy because there's not enough oomph draws too much energy because there's too much oomph. The jump between the 7.4 and the 9.9, it's still quite a big jump. It's very noticeable that the gun is just firing better, quieter, faster, smoother on this battery. But the jump between the 9.9 and the 11.1 is almost nothing. Almost nothing. The rounds per second between this one and this one is quite a big gap. The rounds per second between this one and this one is less of a gap. The semi-auto, massive gap. Massive gap. Almost no gap. The biggest thing, the amp draw and the heat, so much more. Don't tell people 11.1 is the way forward. You must use 11.1. It must have XT60 connectors. You must have 18 AWG wiring. You must. Because big black and grey variable right here. This is what is deciding. And then you get to pick, as the person building the gun, which is giving you the better trigger response. If you don't care about a LiPo fire, and you don't care the gun is getting red hot, use it. Go nuts, who cares? If you want your gun to last the longest, and you feel this is the battery, that's the one to use. On paper, electric is electric, and batteries only give what they're being told to give. Reality, big black and grey variable. Doesn't make that other shit untrue, it just adds a big fucking variable with lots of little offshoots and roots going, oh, hang on a second, have you thought about this? 14.8 volt batteries. I used to use 10.8 NIMIs in my AKs. This is before LiPo technology. I used to have batteries made up by Component Shop that were 10.8 volt NIMI sticks. And they were like 600 milliamp, I think, 1100 milliamp, I can't remember what the word now. But they would fit inside the AK top cover perfectly. 12 volt was way too much. And again, back in the day, because we only had NiCads and nickel metal hydride batteries, we had nothing else. You had to, you know, run, if you wanted to get the high rate of fire and make your battery last all day, you were running a 12 volt battery like this, and it was fucking awesome, man. And you'd run it in a sling. You'd literally run the battery in your sling because it was such a big battery. You build the battery into the gun. You'd buy a launcher for your gun, just put the battery in. The old boys will know what I'm talking about. You had an M16 with an M203 on it, just so you had somewhere to put your fucking battery. Now we live in a time where we have these batteries, they're smaller, they provide more, they're better. But they have their downsides. And you have to think about the best battery for the build. Don't just quote shit like it's gospel. Anything I say, don't quote it like it's gospel. If you disagree with me, fuck it, disagree. I don't care. But nothing I've said is wrong. Nothing I've said is wrong. It's about giving the correct information. You don't have to use 11.1. You have other options. Being a qualified electrician and knowing all about electric does not mean you know anything at all about airsoft guns, because I know so much about airsoft guns, and my understanding of electricity, I'm not an electrician. I haven't got a fucking clue. I can only go with the results that I find, and I can guarantee I build and repair more airsoft guns that run on electric than any electrician where it's their full-time job. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. We worked out the other day that I build just AEGs, build and repair AEGs. In the time that I have been doing negative airsoft, I've done about 2,000 builds. Or 2,000 jobs. That's a lot. That's a lot of acquired knowledge. That's why I get to go back and go, yeah, see, I was right. Remember when I said that and now people are saying, oh, no, he was wrong. Oh, wait, no, he is right. Turns out he is right. Whoops. There are times when I've gone, yeah, that was wrong. That was wrong. And that's why I've done this extra bit at the end, so that you guys can go, ah, He's noticed that what he said might not be taken the correct way. He knew what he meant, he didn't know how to say it, and it took him all night to think about it. Anyway, that's it. Now it's the end. Now you can fuck off.